we don't know what golden nuggets we're going to have before we get into it.
Yeah, I should probably say what episode number we're on, and I think it's episode 96, but don't quote me on that. I think it is.
Right. Welcome to episode 96. And if it's not 96, then come for us. I don't know.
So, to the listeners, I have badgered Megan, and I've approached her several times. I feel like it's badgering, but she finally relented because I enjoyed her on the episode that she was on forever ago. I loved it so much because I left that feeling so energized. And as an ambivert of sorts, it can be draining to come off these calls. But I just felt so invigorated and energized. And I just need more of this because it would make podcasting so much more fun and easeful. And that's kind of what I was looking to do. So unless things change, and they could, we're going to allow for life to happen, but the game plan is roughly twice a month. I'm speaking it into existence. And we'll just pop on and share what's been going on and what's resonating with us and what we want to share with each other and by default those who are listening in to us. So this is kind of my permission to connect with you because we don't get to talk very often. Life happens, and I haven't made the time to reach out very often.
Right. But like we said, life happens. And that's powerful, as
Mhm.
it just takes us on whatever course it is on. And I think it's great that you're showing up for your path the way that you are. And I've continued with this podcast for hopefully 96 episodes. Hopefully, we got that number right. Otherwise, the listeners are going to come after us. But no, I agree. I think it's always really lovely to meet and have a meeting of the minds and discussion of ideas. And that's definitely where my heart is. It's just sometimes I don't know what the correct answer is. And I enjoy having this philosophy of open mindedness. So, always happy to discuss with you.
So, how about you go first?
Well, I know we just read this book. So a lot of my thoughts were really based on the book that we had just read and that we have this little mini book club happening. I know we'll discuss that in more detail when we meet with the author and everything. And I just think it was so powerful that you just kind of got this inclination to say, "Oh, I think Megan should read this book," and sent it my way because I don't think I would have found it otherwise. And the book's premise was really all about how the interconnection of things. And I found so many moments that I felt weaved so effortlessly with kind of my own life experience and the wisdom I'm trying to take from my human experience that I just found it really powerful that you thought of me and what have you. But yeah, I'm excited to launch into that discussion whenever. But I know you also had texted me right before this and we kind of took a quiz and everything. So there's lots to discuss and I'm happy to start anywhere.
When I got that message from you about all of the quotes that you were highlighting, I was like, I need to reach out to the author directly. And so this afternoon, I went ahead and emailed her. So hopefully she'll be able to join us for the April 9th recording. I'm not sure if she will or not, but hopefully we'll get her on sooner than later. And yeah, I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, the only person I know of that had psychic abilities from when they were younger and didn't just develop them later on was you. And so I was just curious, since you have that similarity with her, how much of that was a shared experience and how much of it was just unique to her. So I thought if she had some hiccups or obstacles or challenges to being believed or trusting, that those might have been things that you dealt with as well. Because I know there for a while, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were saying that you were able to shut it off because it was a little bit overwhelming at first, and maybe you were a little too open with sharing with everybody, even if they hadn't asked you for guidance or to connect with their loved ones. You were seeing spirits and just being like, oh, your uncle wants to say something to you. And they may have been a little weirded out. That's what I can remember from the conversation. I just thought you, since you have a more similar background to her than I do, I'm still not a psychic. I was like, it would be so cool if you had the time, the bandwidth to read this book and then get on the call with me to ask her questions because you would be coming from a more like informed place to ask her smart questions.
Right, exactly. And I mean, not that you're not psychic, because I believe even the reader mentions this. Everyone has intuitive guidance gifts, whatever those are, or just senses that go beyond the normal, whether that be a really keen sense of smell, or maybe seeing things that most other people couldn't see, or how we might say beauty being in the eye of the beholder. Maybe sometimes passing somebody on the street and just being that there's something different about that person, just a weird sense or a weird knowing, I think is all construed as psychic ability or what have you. I think psychic gets a bad rep in our culture. And it's also one of the reasons why I kind of don't fully claim that as a part of me and why I really enjoyed this book. And I completely have a lot of paralleled early childhood experiences, not so much an NDE. I've never experienced those, but from a development of my own gifts and whether or not it's taking a forefront in my life or a background in my life, still being integrated within myself and finding an ethical way to exist in this world. Yeah, like you said, I don't today go up to people and just say, "Hey, I'm getting this download." I don't get downloads on behalf of people anymore, or it's extremely rare. And I believe that's the way I've claimed my gifts are when I do pass people on the street, I might get some type of slight hit like, oh, they're really having a rough day, or ooh, that person's about to experience something very difficult. And I just send them peace or I send them love, just as human to human. We're all walking this plane of existence with our own struggles and fortunes and what have you. And I think there's this disconnect with one another that on a subtle nature, I try to connect with it regardless. But there were a lot of beautiful parallels in the book, and I know that we'll get to it, whether that be today or another day. But she even mentioned certain things at age 10. She developed this crushing loneliness. And I really had that at age 10. I remember it was my birthday, and I remember it was the first time that I really did not want to live. And that's kind of sad to be age
Mm.
10 and being like, I'd like to die now. I don't really know if I connected it with, I want to be with my friends in the beyond, or just, it was so lonely to be in this existence where we don't acknowledge what's actually happening. And we kind of just go about our days like zombies in our 9 to 5s or whatever it is our life brings us. And we're not connected. We're just not connected. There were just so many of these moments throughout the book, or running into people that I believe I had had past lives with, and kind of connecting and being like, oh, I know you. I know you, but I don't know you. And the interesting dynamics that come to play there and all of that. My husband and I believe that we know each other from other lives. We might not know what those lives are, but we know
Fairies again?
well, my domestic partner and I, we believe that we know each other from so
Oh,
many
okay.
lifetimes. Yeah, yeah. And it's one of I call them, it's like so, I think we're married in other lifetimes, or like, yeah, it just carries over. So it's one of those beautiful, powerful things of just knowing somebody or knowing somebody's spirit or soul and like walking with them as consciously as you can, given again life. So anyway, it's
Yeah,
so
Megan,
difficult.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss out on some announcement and forget to send you a card or
Oh gosh, I'm not even on
something.
social media. I find it to be so caustic. I think it's this belief that this curated version of ourselves is our actual selves. And something that I always approached social media was I want to be me, and whether it be good or bad or what have you. Anyway, point is that even that became still a version of me that I'm showing, and I didn't like this on-screen, off-screen version of me. Anyway, so I just kind of canned it for now, but we'll see if I come back. Anyway, I promise I won't let you miss an announcement. We're engaged to be engaged. We'll see. The third dimension wedding stuff is just it's just such a headache. I don't really want to do it.
Yeah. Oh, and I apologize if I misspoke and labeled you as a psychic if that's not how you identified. So,
I don't
like,
mind at all. The thing words I think that it's one of those we could even get into this nuanced, I don't think debate over psychic what is psychic. I think for me when I hear the word empath, I immediately think unhealed. When people are, oh, I'm an empath, I'm wondering what in your consciousness in this lifetime you have still yet to heal from. As an example, when I kind of classified myself as an empath, the ability to feel others' emotions and kind of go along with them. If I was in a cold room, I would feel cold. Yeah, a cold emotional room. If I was in a really funny room, I would be laughing. But the not being able to maintain one's own center amongst other people's range of emotion, I find that to be potentially ungrounded. And not that I can speak for everybody else's experience except for my own, but when I was using the word empath, I kind of came across my own developmental journey wherein today I acknowledge that I have responsibility for how I am feeling. And if I'm around people that are exceptionally sad, it's okay to care for their sadness, but I don't have to carry it within me. And I believe as an empath, I used to carry their sadness or become sad with them. And now I honor their space and I can hold it in a bubble as opposed to becoming it. And anyway, I don't know how I just got on this tangent here, but I don't mind any labels in and of themselves are labels and they can be accurate or inaccurate. I'm not going to fight you on the word psychic or not. Um, so I think probably empath might make me prickle a little bit more given the reasons just specified, but you're fine always, April. So
Well, feel free to always call me out or clarify something for sure. So happy equinox tomorrow.
oh, I know. So that's the spring equinox, right? So
Do you
we've
have any
got,
plans?
I don't have any plans. I had more plans for the lunar eclipse last week where it was kind of avoid people. So I do try to follow the moon path more as female, I think is more
Mm,
yin. And yin is, well, I guess solar like equinoxes are the play between yin and yang, but I do follow the moon more so than the equinoxes. What are you doing?
nothing that I know of. I love this time because the day and night is equal and just something about that. I love that esoteric concept of things being equal. And here where I live, the nature is just blooming. It's been winter, 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 and then this past week, everything's just blooming into life. It's beautiful. I love being out in the country. I take so many frequent breaks. I'll just walk outside and sniff some flowers or something. So
Right.
yeah, no special plans. No.
Exactly. And I'm with you because in the Julius Caesar calendar, the spring equinox used to be the new year. This would have been January 1st.
Yeah.
And now it's just we go by a different type of calendar, but this used to be the new year. And so I find it really fun that yeah, we can have our new year, we can have new resolutions, we can kind of spring forward any day of the year. It doesn't have to be a particular, oh, January 1st. And we can kind of embrace other cultures, ideas, the nature itself, etc. And as we know, spring really is all about this like rejuvenation. And I think in my own personal understanding of traditional Chinese medicine or the five rhythms from Chinese medicine, and they talk about the change from winter, which is ruled by the rhythm of water, into spring, which is ruled by the rhythm of wood, and it is the most powerful transformation that we go to. It has the most energy behind it, and it has to, because the amount of energy it takes for the earth to thaw and then produce the flowers that you then can go pick in the warm weather, the bugs, the animals, the grass, it's all coming to life again. It is truly, it's one of the most powerful transformations that happens in nature. It's much easier, as it were, to just kind of drop the leaf as opposed to actually create the bud and then have the leaf sprout. So I always get a little tired this time of year because there's so much energy required to come out of this deep thaw that I love. I love to kind of nestle in and have all that soup during winter. So then to kind of spring forward and do all the things, it can be a little draining, but it is such a beautiful time too. Are you impacted by the time change? Do you have that? Not all states do, but do you have the time change and how does that affect you?
We have the time change here, and I refuse to let it affect me. I'm going to get my sleep. I'm in a really privileged place right now where just a full-time student, so I'm not having to work, and it's online. And so I can make my own schedule really. And so I was like, yeah, I'm not going to let this affect me. I'm going to sleep in until I want to, and then I'm going to go to bed at the right time. So it didn't affect me because I've heard that because of that 1 hour of lost sleep, it affects a lot of people physically. And they've shown how there are trends where there are so many more heart attacks and other urgent health issues in the ER and so forth the day after because that's how important sleep is. And I'm a big fan of sleep.
Me too. Me too. So that's good because I used to live my life very much like rest is a reward for working really hard. And now I really try not to do that. Rest is not a reward. I really need to nurture and honor this physical experience that I'm having, which kind of does necessitate and require a lot of rest, especially when I'm integrating some huge lesson or introducing a new pattern in my life, whether that be exercise or cutting back on sugar or something like that. It's like, oh, okay, well, then I need to rest more. And it's so backwards to what our, I want to say a normal society, but what a normal society would have us believe, rest is a reward for working hard after a long day. And that's really insane about the health implications of the change of time. I didn't realize that. So, wow, fascinating, really fascinating.
Which, okay, so we might be getting into this, but one of the classes I am taking right now is positive psychology. And one of the required videos was a TED Talk by a lady named Ingrid, and I cannot remember her last name, but the title of the TED Talk was Where Joy Hides and How to Find It. And she was talking about the science of joy and how we look at it. It's kind of like you were saying, a reward for working hard and all those things. And she said, no, it's really vital to our existence. And she was providing the data behind her statement, but how it's vital to our well-being and that it's our birthright as humans to have these little moments of joy and that we don't have to save them up in our head, save them up as this reward that will reach one day or on the weekends, and that we can't tap into the little joyful moments right now. And it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but she was saying that the science supports that joy is found in circular objects. They had these architects that were designing nursing homes and things with a lot of circular shapes, which serves to engender joy because you get that feeling of the circular nature of life as opposed to linear, sharp edges or lines. And she's like, why is it that everything that around us is made by architects to be straight lines, very linear way of thinking and living, as opposed to the circular way of living and thinking that makes us happy? So I've been really enjoying this class. One of the things that it was talking about is that, let me back up just a little bit. This is the same class that's having us read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. Have you read it? It is so amazing. Okay. So when I was reading, I'm listening to the audiobook, but when we got to the part 3 or something about the logotherapy, I could not believe that the book had originally gone out without that part added on, because to me, that is so important. Experiences in having survived the Holocaust and the concentration camps, but the part at the end, because people had said, we want to hear more about this branch of psychology that you've fathered called logotherapy. It's basically the study of meaning. And he takes all of the things that he learns before and during his experience in the concentration camps and formulated it into logotherapy, what his idea of it is. And it's so cool because for me, it is completely a paradigm shift. And I think you have to have both parts. If it had just been the part about logotherapy and how there's meaning and suffering, you'd be like, okay, this person's talking from a place of privilege, doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know suffering, but he was well established that during the first part of the book, and how it's a miracle that he survived. If the listeners haven't read the book, I highly encourage listening to all of it and sticking it through and reading the part on logotherapy, because when it first goes into that section, at least for me, the wording was a little obtuse, or the language is a little bit thick for me to get through. And so I'm kind of going on autopilot. But then it goes into examples, and it's about how it's really helped people in different case studies. And he was talking about how our feelings as human beings, there's nothing wrong with them, but they have been pathologized. So maybe there wasn't anything wrong with them initially, but because of the way that we're not allowed to experience grief or sit with loss or feel melancholy or have any of those emotions, they then become pathologized, and then we really are unwell because these real feelings that we're having, we're not allowed to process them in a grade. It's just suppressed. It kind of goes along with the whole theme of positive psychology. I mean, it's been a thing for a long time, and here I mean, it just goes to show you how entrenched in the psychiatric, psychological world, how we're still so bent on what's wrong with people and fixing them, that I didn't know that positive psychology was an actual branch of scientific study, and it studies what's right with people. And to me, it's so empowering to be like, of course, there are some weaknesses, but what's right? What's going on good and right in your world? And let's capitalize on those things, because we can do something about it. Some of the crappy stuff that we're experiencing or going through, it's either normal or we can't do anything about. Our feelings are normal, or there's nothing we can do about our circumstances at that moment. So let's just capitalize on what is going right and on our strengths. And you were such a good sport. I know several people who would not be okay with this. That's why I gave you an out. We had less than 30 minutes before we were to get on the call. But it had just occurred to me, let me send you this link to take your VIA character strength survey so that you could take it possibly, and then we can discuss our results. So we can either go into that, or if you wanted to touch on anything that I've set up to this point, feel free to do that.
Because let's do the latter and then go to the former, because what are you studying right now? Obviously you're in a psychology of happiness course, but are you pursuing a degree in something, and how is that going?
The end goal is to become a therapist or accountant. And to do that, you have to get your master's degree first before you can be licensed. And before you have your master's, you have to have your bachelor's. And I never got my bachelor's. I had an associate degree. So I'm something of a late bloomer, but that could be reflected by the exalted Saturn in my chart. Things are just going to get better as I get older, I guess. So I was like, okay, so let me do this bachelor program, and then I'm going to try and apply for a master's degree in counseling. And here's the cool thing. I heard something about the sand and the beach. It was a metaphor for life that I think was on shoot. I wanted to really be able to attribute. Anyway, I named my podcast Sheffy's Sandbox, and then just to the Sandbox. And then I found out several years later that the Sabian symbols, have you heard of those?
No.
Okay, so I'm probably going to get this so wrong, but there was an esoteric, and he and this lady were in this American school of mysticism. Anyway, he would put each degree, the 360 degrees, each one of them on a sheet of paper or something, and into a bowl. And I know I'm getting this wrong, but he would draw one out. She wouldn't know what he had drawn, but she was a psychic. And so she would channel a symbol, a mental image. And so they met for 365 days or however long it took them. And they would meet in this park in California, maybe San Diego or something. And when they were finally done, they published their Sabian symbols. And so you're supposed to say the degree of my ascendant is 15 degrees Scorpio. There's going to be a specific symbol, a word picture associated with that. And I found out that you're actually, it's kind of like an astrology. If it's 15 degrees, then so many minutes, then it goes to the next degree, right? But I didn't know that. And so I was reading for just my 15 degree Scorpio ascendant. And the Sabian symbol associated with that was children playing around 5 hills of sand. And I had already been saying in the podcast that 5 is one of my favorite numbers because it can symbolize change and adventure. And I'm getting to the point now where, hello, universe, I think I'm not so excited about the number 5 anymore because I've had so much change. But I just thought it was really cool that I had been implementing like sand into my brand, and here it was associated with the Sabian symbol. And then I found out that in the master's program that I'm eyeing, they have 3 different types of certifications, and one of them is sand tray therapy. And I was like, that might be where I need to go do that. So I just researched on YouTube video after video of what sand tray therapy looks like, what it consists of. And I think I would really, really love it. So I'm excited. So thank you for asking. And that was a long answer.
Not at all. I think that was fantastic. That's really exciting. I'm very happy for you as you continue to grow your education and your mind, and especially in the pursuit of something that you authentically love. I think you're one of those rare forms that will just go after what you love as opposed to, oh, I'll just stay in this. And that's really powerful. I do come from this privileged background where I was literally afforded the opportunity to go to college at a 4-year institution at age 17 through my parents. It was paid for. And I think because of that, I didn't really take advantage of that education at that time the way I could have if I were going today. And it's not that I didn't learn a lot in undergrad or anything. I personally just think that I was just kind of too immature at the time to really dedicate myself to studies the way I probably, but by the time I finished my degree, I was very dedicated to my studies, but it was a rough go in the beginning, kind of finding my footing. So I think, I hate to say gods, but like universal timing is always right, you know? And so whatever timing it is, it's not really late blooming. It's just that it arrived exactly when it needed to. And I'm glad that you're on this path. Who knows? Maybe you would not have studied what you're studying today. So part of your undergrad experience is a psychology of happiness course. And so you're reading a textbook and also a few other books, it sounds, about this search for meaning, or I think that's Viktor Frankl, right? And different forms of psychology, or it is a psychology of happiness course.
It is a course completely dedicated to positive psychology.
Okay, got it. Yes, yes. And I remember, so this is such an aside, but when I was in undergrad, I kind of went through, or maybe it was right after I graduated, and I went through a little bit of a rough patch for several years, actually. And one of my friends, before she was like, I have to take some space in this relationship, gave me a book on the psychology of happiness. And it was from the Harvard professor that was teaching that course. It was probably one of the first courses on the psychology of happiness and all the studies. And I read it and really tried to apply some of those principles in my life. And I still try to do that today, you know, like gratitude, practicing gratitude as an action. I actually make a gratitude ABC list every day. And I might not get every single one filled out, but like throughout the day, I'm just thinking, oh, I still don't have H. Like, ooh, what am I grateful about that begins with the letter H? And I really try to train
So
my
cool.
brain to be more positive. And
Uh-huh.
I realized I didn't have an R. And I have this automatic rainbow maker behind me and it's going off right now. I'm like, rainbow's going to go for R. So it's always, I really like learning these things and trying to be more positive. And you're right. Sometimes I have this magnifying mind that if I'm specifically looking for what's wrong, that magnifies. But if I'm looking for what's right, that magnifies. And it's really just which part of my brain am I going to feed today? And it doesn't mean on the days where I am kind of doom and gloom that I've done something wrong. It's just, okay, I'm in that space today, and it's okay to embrace the melancholy or to have a genuine set of feelings on grief or sadness or loneliness or what have you. There's no secondary emotion of, and then I'm wrong for having it. And I really, really related with what you were sharing about that. I'm so glad you're getting exposure to those types of philosophies and ideas and ways of living that can really make quite large ripples.
I was talking to my counselor. I have always been fascinated by how people think and what makes them tick. And I was like, why did I not consider this a real career possibility earlier in life? And I know for one reason, one of them was I did not come from a privileged background. And so I needed to find a degree that made the most money the quickest. And so I got an associate's degree and I worked my way through school to become a respiratory therapist. And that really did change my whole, it changed what opportunities were available to me. I went from really struggling from paycheck to paycheck to being able to have my first real vacation. It was a really marked improvement in my life. Now I was miserable doing what I was doing, and but I asked the counselor, why didn't this come up into my field before? And she's like, well, you probably wouldn't have been the same counselor even if you had that you would be today. And I was like, oh yeah, I know for sure that I wouldn't have been the same kind of counselor that I am today. So that's part of the reason what really finally nudged me into becoming a therapist or counselor, or at least on the path to it. 'Cause I feel at this point that my goals I've hit so many brick walls and I felt so broken by the universe. I'm like, okay, I know better than to say this is what I'm doing or this is what's going to happen. I'm just going to put myself in that path and see what happens. Because if at the end of the day I become a therapist, great, but it's never going to happen if I don't at least start. And maybe something else will come up along the way to divert me, but I needed, this is what I was going to say. I needed to make sense of the suffering and pain that I've experienced. I needed it to mean something. And so if I was going to be able to somehow harness that and make it of service to other people, then I could be like, okay. And in that book by Viktor Frankl, he quotes Nietzsche pretty often, that one thing about how if someone, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but if someone knows the why, then they can endure almost any how. And I always wanted to know, why is this happening? Why? So if I can tell myself that the why is to make me a better counselor, to be more empathetic, we're using the empathy, but to be more understanding of people and to be able to meet them where they are, then that to me would be my why. To get me through the how, that would be my why. And so, yeah, it's been really fascinating. I once had a counselor, and I didn't know if this was something you're supposed to do or not, or if it was bad manners, but I asked him, do you deal with depression yourself? Is that why you got into this field? And he said no. He just really had a heart for people who were suffering, and he wanted to help. And so his parents were upset with him because they wanted him to be an attorney or a doctor or something. So they weren't happy with his life choices. But for me, I could tell that he hadn't come from a place where he really understood me. And to me, that made a big difference in how I felt, whether or not he was possibly judging me or how safe I felt in sharing. So I don't know if I can tell myself that it would make me a more approachable, understanding person, like hold space for somebody when they're going through their own personal hell, that would be great.
That's powerful. That's powerful. And I agree with you on the empathy, that the empathy is really necessary for being in the field that you're heading into. And that's really exciting that you are letting it kind of just being on the path, that other quote of, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Well, maybe I'll be diverted from this path, but right now this is the only course that I feel I can take. And I have the same experience in just a couple of places, not necessarily just my career or what have you, but there was just times where maybe another path will be available, but right now this is all that's in front of me. And I don't know what it's going to yield, but I'm going to just leap for it. And I think that's really powerful.